So as you've been able to see over the last several series, we've been able to bring in different experts into the real estate process. I'm a real estate agent. I don't pretend to know what some of these other people do. We leave that up to them. That's their expertise. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Agnes Reizik from Spokane River Mobile Notary. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Tim, for having me.
So today, what she's going to talk about a little bit is kind of what her expertise is, what she does, and why it's important for us all, including myself, to listen to her. Agnes, tell us a little bit about what you do.
So I'm a mobile notary, and I specialize in real estate transactions. And basically, I travel to people's homes, their workplace, coffee shops, before hours, after hours, during the workday, whenever it's most convenient for the client to sign their real estate documents when they can't come into the closing company.
And that's a really important thing to be able to do because we're here to serve you. Serving you doesn't mean you being in our office at 10 a.m. when you've got to work, or if you live out of town, or if you're elderly and you just can't get around as well. So Agnes has got a tremendous business, someone that I really enjoy using when I can to be able to get this important paperwork done. So when someone's getting ready to close either on a purchase or a sale, give us some of the basics that we need to look for. How do they get ready to do that?
Probably the biggest problem or the biggest thing to look out for is the person's ID, their driver's license, matching to the name on the documents. That's really the sole purpose of a notary at the closing table, is to verify that you are who you truly are. So one of the issues that we face is oftentimes people come to a closing and their names actually don't match. The ID doesn't match the documents.
Interesting. So some people go by their middle name as their first name, and they don't talk about themselves in that way, but yet you can't do that. You've got to be able to notarize these people as to who they legally are.
Yes, definitely. So yes, that is one of the common things that happen. People switch their middle names to their first name, or they use nicknames, like mine's, for example, is Aggie, which a lot of people don't know here in town, because I very specifically use Agnes now. But you can't, if your ID does not reflect Aggie, you have to use your legal name, which is Agnes.
That makes all the sense in the world. So the lenders are going to want to lend to Aggie. You're going to want to lend to Agnes.
Lend to Agnes.
Okay, so let's talk about a couple other things. So are you just helping people on purchases and sales of real estate, or does your services expand beyond that?
I do go outside of real estate transactions, so I will do like estate planning documents for a couple of attorneys. People will find me online, so they'll want, I call it general notary work, so things like auto transfers, DOL forms when people can't go into the DOL, just kind of any legal documents that requires a notary. They also call me for that. But my primary passion and specialization is in real estate transactions.
And she's been preferred for a lot of different closing companies around the city. A lot of people have her name and like to use her also. So I'm sure you must see some issues out there with people getting married or changing their name. How's that work in the whole signing process?
Yes, those hyphenated names.
Oh.
Those generally cause probably some of the biggest issues at closings. Okay. Some people do like to hyphenate those names, and it just turns out that we get the documents out there and there's a hyphenated name on there, but either we'll just call her she hasn't yet changed her name over, or decided not to hyphenate it, or just use the married name or her maiden name. But hyphenated names tend to be like the biggest issue. Also, in regards to DOL, we see some really weird things where part of the hyphenated name ends up being in the middle name and part of it ends up being the last name, and that's not the same with actually having the hyphen in there. So notary's job, my job, is really to make sure that those documents have to match to that ID. So if they don't, that can actually cause a closing to stop right there, and we have to redraw the documents.
So this shouldn't be a surprise at the closing table, though. Shouldn't they just speak with their lender and find out how the documents are drawn? I mean, you'll have to go by what the documents say, right?
Yes, yeah. So one of the things, definitely, talk to your lender, talk to your real estate agent, talk to your closer. So a lot of times I think people are not reviewing the documents, but you have to review your name. You have to, like, lenders will send out what's called a closing disclosure. That's one of the great documents to look at. It'll have your name on there. And if there's a variation, if you notice that, hey, my name is spelled wrong, or there should be a hyphen in there, or I'm only using my last name, you should definitely alert your lender, your realtor, and your closer.
And we fix these all the time. You may be excited in the moment, you sign a contract and you could be under your maiden name and everybody's excited, they want to get this thing done, but we'll fix things later on and change those to the right thing that the lender needs to see, because those are the forms that Agnes is going to have. Otherwise, nothing's going to match and we're going to be really just have some disappointed people at the closing table.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot harder to change it once you're at the closing, especially when you're doing a mobile closing. I don't have access to a printer to get it printed up right away. Although we have gotten kind of creative on that too sometimes.
Yeah.
We have been at a library once before and we actually printed up the documents again at the library. But you don't, if you want a smooth closing, the best way to do it is to just make sure that your name truly matches to your ID. So everything should match up.
Okay. So in a real estate transaction, there's a lot of moving parts. They've got lending docs going back and forth. We've got showings. We've got inspections. We've got dates to worry about. We need to know when and where you're going to be when you want to sign your documents. Tell us a little bit about how that works in terms of scheduling goes.
Yeah, so scheduling, I mean, the main point is if you know you're going to be out of town or you know you have one of those schedules where you can't come into the office at the drop of a dime, let your realtor, let your closer and your lender loop everybody in, let them know that these are the specifics of my job, or this is when I'm going to be taking off on vacation, or I'm going to be out of town, or my spouse can't be at the same time at the closing when I'm there. Loop them in because that's generally when someone like me as a mobile notary gets contacted, because then we can send me out to you and then handle the closing that way. But we need some heads up.
Yeah, a lot of people get confused too with signings versus closings. Those are two different events. Closings will occur after the signings and after we're funded. So signings can be done way in advance. For example, a seller can come in a week in advance if they have to. Buyers a little bit more difficult because they got to get the lending docs there, but if there's a loan. But nonetheless, it's something important to keep in mind. It's not going to cost you anymore. It's something we try and do as a service to get this thing done. Agnes, thank you so much for coming by and giving us some very, very valuable information on how to make this process a little bit easier. Why don't you tell people where you're from again?
So I'm Agnes Reizik and I'm with Spokane River Mobile Notary.
If you want to get a hold of Agnes, go ahead and check out the information below. I'm Tim Olsen. I'm a real estate agent with John L. Scott.